Hello, I am your host, Kathy Chester, and welcome to the Move It or Lose It podcast, a podcast about all things that move the mind, body, and soul. The Move It or Lose It podcast is for information, awareness, and inspirational purposes only. I am not a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV, so please consult your doctor before making any medical decisions. The views expressed by advertisers, guests, or contributors are their opinions and not necessarily the views of the Move It or Lose It podcast. So, all right, guys, here we are with part two, our interview with Brian Wallace, who, like you know, from if you listened yesterday, we were talking about his diagnosis with MS, and Brian is also an alumni of Michigan and played for University of Michigan football. And so, Brian, welcome back again to part two.
Thank you. How you doing, Kathy? Thanks for
I am good. Absolutely. Back in our Michigan gear. And so a couple of things that we want to touch on is when you were diagnosed young, 27, when did you or who were the first people that you felt comfortable, I guess comfortable is a word, even telling that you had multiple sclerosis?
Well, my first I was actually engaged at the time. I wasn't married yet. So I think the first people that I told after diagnosis was my mom and my ex-wife.
Okay.
And my brother, and he was dating, I believe, his wife now. He's still married to Jody. So she knew too. So it was immediate family and my fiance.
Yeah. Yeah. So tricky. So I think back then too, just keep it. It was
Yeah,
a scary thing to talk about.
yeah. I really. There's so many emotions that go through you when you hear that word, multiple sclerosis, and I kind of had like a feeling of embarrassment. Yeah, um, because how can that happen to somebody that was so athletic as me?
Right.
You know, um, confusion. There's a lot of emotions that's running through your head. So I didn't want anybody to know. I have a very tight circle of friends from high school all the way till now through college and all that. I only have certain people that I talked to my whole life, and that circle of friends, they found out quick. So they were there to support me too. But other than that,
Good.
I mean, I was working for the state of Ohio. I told
Uh,
nobody. I told nobody where I worked.
were you afraid of losing your job?
Uh, I wasn't afraid of losing my job. That
I'm still
never
here. I'm plugged in.
that wasn't a fear, but
Okay.
I didn't want the discrimination part uh
Yeah.
and to be treated differently part.
Yeah.
So I just kept it to myself for as long as I could. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets to a point where you can't hide it.
Exactly.
So that was probably about maybe 8 to 10 years into my journey with this disease, and then it started coming out that if I missed work a couple of days, I was getting an infusion, and
Right.
so then
Yeah.
that's when I mean, for my first 10 years I never even had FMLA paperwork filed.
Right. Right.
I literally I didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
uh,
Totally understand. I even now, like I said, with the support groups, men and women are still concerned about telling their employer or friends, and they're still not ready to tell people.
it's a sad thing in the 20, and actually it's going to be 27 years in a few more weeks. I got diagnosed in October. But in the 26 years that I've been doing this, like I said, I stayed quiet for the first, decade or something of doing
Yeah.
it. But I sat there and watched. There was other people that had disabilities that I worked with, and I watched how they were treated, and I watched how they were discriminated against, and I'm like, man, that's
Yeah.
not right. So
Right.
I learned so much along the way. What is a ADA, requirement for disabled people, and if buildings aren't in code, we have a voice to speak up.
Right.
We don't have to work in a building that's not safe for us, and an
Right.
environment that's not safe for us. I learned to not be afraid of
Right.
fighting for this disease.
Yeah.
It's not my fault that I got it. I didn't ask
Right.
for it.
Which is a big thing. I think you just even saying that, because I know people still deal with that. I remember feeling guilt of that, feeling guilty with the kids, feeling like, wow, like this is great for the kids that I have this. And just that guilt. And then finally, years later, the same as you, thinking this is insane that I would feel guilty about a disease that I have no control over.
Right.
And so you get to that point. So I'm really glad that you did and were able to have this support then of the people that you told. And so that's really good. When did you decide to go on TikTok and start being more vocal?
So
Because you are a presence on TikTok, sir.
I appreciate that. I've only been doing this for a few months. I started doing it in February, and I have my daughter to thank for that. Because she's been on me for probably about a year. Because I'm not a social media person. I don't even have a Facebook, Instagram, none of that. And she's telling me, you got to get on social media and start talking about your disease and how you deal with it.
Right.
Your story is amazing. And I'm like, nobody wants to hear from an old guy.
Not true.
And so she talked me into it, and I just started doing it, playing around, and then I started getting comments, asking me questions about it. And then I actually, after the 6 months I've been doing it, it's actually really kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of rewarding because I've met so many people that have this disease, and even
Right.
other chronic diseases. I've met people that have migraines, fibromyalgia.
Right.
It's just, there's so many things out there people are really suffering with. I mean,
Absolutely.
my wife has fibromyalgia, so I mean, I understand that one a little bit, but
Right.
there's so many things that people are dealing with that are painful,
Yeah.
but and they're afraid because they're afraid of losing their job.
Yeah.
They're afraid of talking about it.
Absolutely. And mental health issues, that's the loneliness of that, and not people not understanding that still. And, the struggle and the loneliness that goes on with that. And I think when we have a platform like we do, it opens up that ability to understand, empathize with
Yeah,
so many that are struggling.
yeah.
So I really appreciate, I've listened to a lot of your TikTok videos, and I just really love what you're doing in that. I think it's a big help for us and for the ones that we're able to help and to reach. So I love that you're doing that. I think it's a really neat thing. And I thank your daughter for getting you into that. So, all right. So I saw a video that you did, and I want you to go there first. I didn't put that in my questions, that you talked about what MS could not take away from you.
Yeah.
And so I want you to go there, and then I want you to go into what MS has taken away. You can go either one first. I'll let you
Okay.
choose.
Well, I'll talk about what it'll never be able to take away from me. And the reason that I do this is, like, when I played football in Michigan, Bo Schembechler, he used to tell us in a full team meeting, the 2 years I played with him, he'd be like, "Men, yeah, you play for the University of Michigan, and whatever you accomplish in school here, on the football field, nobody's ever going to be able to take that away from you. You win a Big Ten championship 50 years from now, nobody can ever take that away from you." So
Yeah.
that's kind of the philosophy that I've taken throughout my life. So I have all these accomplishments that no MS will never ever be able to take away from me. They'll never be able to take away the fact of who my parents are, my brother is, what defines me, as my work ethic, how hard I work, the Rose Bowls that I went to, the championships that I won. MS
Those
never,
rings.
they will never be able to, I mean, they're never going to be able to take these rings away from me. I'm going to have them forever.
Yeah.
MS will never take that away from me. It'll never take away the accomplishments that I have completed. And even after diagnosis, the stuff that I've done, it's never going to take it, it'll never be able to take that away from me. I am so proud of the fact that I've worked in the workforce for 26 years with this disease.
Yeah.
That is
absolutely.
a hard thing to do. I think that's been a harder thing than the 4 years of playing football at Michigan.
It's an amazing accomplishment for that long that you've been able to be in the workforce. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah. But and then, you know, on the flip side, like you said, what MS has taken away from me, you know, the obvious things, you know, my ability to walk, run, see, but I adjust with it as things change. You know, I've always stayed positive with this disease. You know, I've never been mad at myself for, you know, not being able to do something because it's not my fault.
Right.
It's frustrating.
Right.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, I just we'll talk about a big change for me just within the last year. I love going down out on the Lake Erie, fishing. I had a jet ski up until this spring because I just got to a point where, you know what, I don't think it's safe for me anymore.
Right.
I had that discussion with my wife, and she said she agreed with me, and I'm like, you know what, it's time to sell it. You know, so you have to be able to accept that you're going to have to make adjustments for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. I think it is like, it's a constant, you know, understanding that you'll grieve. I tell this a lot of times to the newly diagnosed. It's not a one and done grieving. You know, there's sometimes big grieving, and there's sometimes, like we're talking about, like unaccepting, like, yeah, this is going to change. This I'm not going to be able to do anymore. And it really sucks because it's like, I have to give this up, and MS, dang it. All right, fine. And there will be adjustments, you're right, that we have to make, that we have to give up, because that's just not going to be our thing, but we'll find something different.
That's it.
And so I love that you keep that positive attitude. And when it takes something away, it's like, okay, but I can do this instead. And so I think that is so important for us to have. Move It or Lose It podcast is proudly sponsored by Disrupting MS Together, designed to help you take control of your wellness while living with multiple sclerosis. Disrupting MS Together aims to increase mobility through functional movement. Coaches Kathy Chester and Molly Witt seek to connect the mind, body, and spirit with guided, focused online workouts and coaching. You'll get targeted workouts sent directly to your email, and Q&A sessions with licensed coaches, early access to podcast episodes with experts in the industry, group workout sessions through Zoom, and curated content that you won't find anywhere else. Early bird pricing is only available for the pilot program, so don't wait. Check it out now. The program includes a tremendous amount of benefit from seasoned coaches who also live and thrive with multiple sclerosis. Learn more and take the leap today. Visit www.msdisrupted.com to learn more and snag your spot now while you can. And we talked a little bit about this, but just for fun. So I couldn't imagine when I was watching your stuff, I'm like, how does this Michigan man live in Ohio? How does this happen? So you made that decision to go back to Ohio. And how do you do that? And why did you do it? So tell our listeners why you moved back to Ohio.
Yeah. Believe me, I didn't want to come back to Ohio. It's not that I don't hate Ohio State, because I never lost to them. So, I mean, why should I hate a team I lost to? So,
like the little dig.
Yeah. But so I came back to Ohio because when I left for Michigan, just like every other 18-year-old that probably plays at a big time Division I, you make a promise to your mom that you're going to take care of her and your family if you make it to the next level.
Sure.
So I made that promise to my mom, hey, I'll take care of you. She was a widow, 47 years old when my dad died. So she was still young. So I told
Right.
her, hey, if I get to the NFL, you won't have a thing to worry about. Well, that didn't happen. So I graduated, and I'm like, I got to go back and take care of my mom. So that's why I
Right.
got back to Ohio.
Yeah.
And she's just passed away a few years ago. So I have no regrets about it.
Right.
I have a lot of fun. There's actually a lot of Michigan alumni
Yeah.
that I actually played with that live in Ohio.
Oh,
Elvis,
wow. Interesting.
my teammate, one of my teammates, Elvis Grbeck, the quarterback.
Okay.
He lives over on the east side of Cleveland.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's a couple other guys. John Jenkin, he played defensive tackle. He was a couple of years younger.
That name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a Cleveland guy, and he still
Okay.
lives in the area. Frank Petrov, he played defensive tackle. He still lives in the area. He's a teacher. Eric Anderson, he won the Buckets Award. He's a teacher over on the east side in Ohio.
Very cool.
So there's a lot of us around, believe it or not.
Yeah, it is hard to believe. That's really interesting. So, another question I have that I wanted to talk to you about as well is talk to because I think there is a big I just talked about this last night in one of the support groups that I lead, is that feeling of loneliness that happens. And a lot of times people don't understand that, especially I'm married, you're married, and they're like, well, you're not lonely. You don't get it. I'm single. I don't have anybody. I don't even have a pet. So how can you say you're lonely? And I'll often explain I know I'm married, I know I have kids, but MS is such a hard way to explain what you need. And sometimes you feel like you're isolated in your own self, and you don't want to talk about it anymore, especially when your caregiver is your spouse. It's like the last thing I want to do is complain again and again. This hurts, this hurts, this hurts. So sometimes I just want to retreat to myself because I don't want to complain again. And it just that's a lonely area, and you are sometimes in pain, and you don't want to call a friend and say, guess what, it's me again, and I'm hurting. So just in case you wanted to know. And so you get into a spot where you kind of retreat back and get very lonely. So what would you say about that? How do you feel about that area?
Yeah, so I never had to deal with that up until January, because I've always, been out in the workforce, so I had coworkers and all that to communicate with. But since actually, probably about a year ago, I was working remotely with my last job before they terminated me because of my MS. I was working remotely, and even though I was working remotely, that was lonely. I don't know how people work remotely.
I know, I know.
Because I've always been a people person.
Yeah.
I worked in a prison. I was around 2,500 bad people.
Wow.
I was around 2,500 bad people.
Wow.
But it was fun because I was around people.
Yeah.
So I've always been a social person. So the MS is a very lonely disease, especially when you become to the point where you're homebound,
Yeah.
And I'm not homebound. I can get in my truck and go drive around, but how much fun is that?
Right.
But so I sit in the house all day, and in the summertime I can go down to the lake.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. You do that now, but you need help, right?
Yeah, I can still go there by myself. But my wife and I go up there a lot when she's able to with where she works.
Okay.
But I can still do it by myself. But yeah, there's certain things that I can't do that I need help with, and I have friends that help me out up there.
Yeah.
My wife helps me out all around the house here. I still do things like I can I'll still make dinner. I'll still cut up vegetables, fruit for my wife. I'll still, do laundry. Unfortunately, I can't vacuum a house,
Right. Right.
and I do anything I can do.
Yeah.
I'll at least make an attempt at it.
Right. Absolutely. No, I think that's a really good thing. And I tell that to my husband. I'm still working, obviously, and I'll say, whatever I can get done, I will absolutely get done. And he knows that. And I think I would assume your wife knows that as well,
Absolutely.
that you'll be getting done what you can get done. And I think there's a release of guilt from that we have to let go, that it is lonely, and there's a loneliness. And I think, admitting that, I think, helps a lot with a lot of the MSers who are just not sure what's going on, and they're not sure, is this going to be forever? And I always say, there's some days that feel really lonely, and there's some days that don't. And there's days too that if you can just reach out to someone, it takes that away. And oftentimes I'll say, and even just getting some movement in will get those serotonin levels up. And that'll help a lot as well, something like that. So I think that helps. And then let's see, any other stories that you would like to tell, anything that you would like to share with the MS?
I just want people to understand that MS isn't a death sentence. There's so many unknowns with this disease that, you can have your first episode and never have an episode the rest of your life.
Right.
I know people like that.
Yes.
I got a friend that I played hockey with, and his mom was diagnosed back when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And she's 85 today and still can walk. You can't even tell.
Yeah.
Well, just because you get diagnosed with this stupid disease doesn't
Right.
mean you're going to be in a wheelchair tomorrow.
Exactly.
You might live 50 years. If you're in your 20s, you might live 50
Yeah.
years, and nobody can even tell.
Exactly.
And you can't worry about that every day, because if you
Right.
do, if you do that, it's going to tear you apart mentally. You have to keep on living your life. After you hear those words, multiple sclerosis, you don't quit. You keep on moving. I didn't change. It's okay. I was working for the state. I got diagnosed. I still worked for the state for another 18 years after that. So
Right.
just because you get that diagnosis doesn't mean that you have to, crawl into a shell and just sit there.
Yeah.
Live your life, live it the best you can, and that's all you can do in the end.
Yeah. 100%. So I guess my last question, Brian, is, I didn't put this down. What would you say to someone, you run into someone newly diagnosed face to face, and they say, I just got diagnosed. I have no idea what this means. I'm very afraid.
I kind of just had that happen to me last weekend. I was on TikTok, and I got a message that a young girl was just diagnosed. She was 23 years old, and she's scared to death. And I made contact with her, and I talked to her all weekend. And I just told her, this disease isn't going to define who you are. You have to, I told her, you have to have a plan. You have to have a game plan.
Yeah.
And just because you have a plan today, and it's, it could be plan A, tomorrow you might have to go to plan B, and then next year or next month you might have to go to plan C.
Yeah.
I think that in the 26 years, I've probably been through the alphabet 3 or 4 times, and I'm on like plan quadruple Z.
Very true.
So, and I would tell somebody that's newly diagnosed, you never quit, and you just keep on going and going and going, because
Yeah.
if you quit, I think that's when you're done.
100%.
Because I think this disease will eat you up if you stop fighting.
Yeah. Yes.
I might be wrong. I'm not a doctor.
Oh, I agree 100%.
I just think that if I would have just, if I would have got that diagnosis at 26 years old, and I would have just said, all right, to hell with it, I'm done.
Right.
You know, I'd be in a nursing home and in a wheelchair.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you agree too, especially now, we didn't have this then, but community,
Oh God, yeah. When I was 26, you know, I'm 54 years old. Back in 1997, the internet was just starting to
right?
blossom.
Dial up.
I graduated from college. Smartphones weren't around. I was still typing my papers on a typewriter, so technology was nothing like it is today.
Right.
I wish it would have been, because I don't think I met anybody. The only time I ever talked to anybody that had MS is when I was in the infusion center,
Right.
hooked up to an IV, and
Right.
somebody in the bed next to me, I'd be like, "What are you in here for?"
Right.
And they'd be like migraines or MS,
Right.
and
Right.
I'd just sit there for an hour and talk to them.
Exactly. Right. That was it. That's all we had.
Yeah,
So I think
that's all we had.
right. Or some terrible support group. I've said it a million times. Mine was literally in a scooter shop, and it was in the middle of one of their rooms, and all we looked at were wheelchairs. And I'm like, this has to be the most depressing. So I didn't even go to anything like that forever. And now I just think they're amazing that you can go to so many different ones. And I just started one, and I'll have to get you on there, that is for newly diagnosed. And I asked two other people to help me lead that. And the other one is for just women. And so the newly diagnosed is really exciting. And so yeah, so that's a great, I love what you would say to a newly diagnosed and what you
Yeah,
have said.
yeah.
So last thing I promise is what can we look forward to? What do you think what do you want to do?
So yeah, that's I'm glad you asked that, because like I told myself back in January when I was terminated. I said, you know what, this isn't it. You're 54 years old. You're not done. You just got to figure this out. And then, with my daughter kind of pressing me a little bit with this TikTok thing and getting me hooked up to that, I'm in the process of starting up a podcast.
I
Uh,
like it.
my format is going to be, obviously, that I played for the University of Michigan, played football and athletic, and that
Yeah.
this disease doesn't have to define you, the
Yeah.
rest of your life. You can define what MS is
Yeah.
with your body. You don't have to say, I got MS, I'm done.
Right.
And people need to understand, and that's another reason I want to do this platform, is that I think that there's a lot of ignorance in society about this disease, that
Oh gosh.
they
Yes.
just don't get it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to this poor 23-year-old girl, and what she does for a living and all that, and what her employer is doing to her. It's just sad.
Oh,
It's
very much so.
aggravating. It's aggravating,
Yes.
sad, and I'm tired of it. And you know what? If I have a voice, I'm going to make it heard.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that, Brian. And it is something that is very much needed. And to have someone like you to stand up for those, and you're going through it right now, and it's very much needed to have those voices heard and to be talked about, because there is still so much ignorance out there. And even when I explain, it is a disease that attacks our entire central nervous system. So we can do this, our entire central nervous system. So it's a disease that is, and even I always say, people always ask me, well, why don't you do more for epilepsy? Because I have rheumatoid epilepsy and MS. And my answer is, epilepsy is understood more. So is rheumatoid. MS is still this misunderstood. And so that was where I felt my heart needed to be more in this podcast. So that's
Yeah,
why.
yeah,
So, Brian, it has been an absolute pleasure being with you this morning and interviewing you. I hope to collaborate more. And once you get this podcast up, I would love to hear about it and interview you about how it's going. So I will look forward to that.
yeah.
And
Absolutely. I would love to
yeah,
have an opportunity after I get it up and running. I'll come back with you and try to get the word out that it's up and running, And I would
That'd be
really
awesome.
appreciate that.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. So thank you so much for being on Move It or Lose It. And to you guys, this will be a 2-part one. So can't wait to hear the feedback, and go blue. And so we're really excited about this one. And guys, have a safe, great week, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Move It or Lose It podcast. It would mean the world to me if you subscribed and left a review. Remember, you can find me on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. New episodes of the Move It or Lose It podcast air every other Wednesday. If you have any suggestions for future guests or topics, please visit my website at www.msdisrupted.com. Until next time.